Isata Kene Mason is one of the, young artists, relevant artists of the musical scene right now. We already had in the past Sheku Kane Mason, her brother, playing the Elgar Cello Concerto. So it's great to, to welcome this such a musical family, young artists in already doing so many important things, and we, Toronto and the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, we want to be part of their lives. Ryan Bancroft, we never met, but I remember already a few years ago, he did a competition in, I think was Copenhagen. I remember seeing the video and thinking, what a gifted, great conductor, so musical, so expressive. And actually he has been conducting also in the other orchestra where I've been music director, in Luxembourg Philharmonic. He has been there. It's great to have him back in Toronto. I'm a big fan of what he does. And he's, of course, developing as a musician and his career, and now he's the music director of the Stockholm Philharmonic. So we have never met each other, but we have exchanged messages, we have been in contact, and I'm a big fan of what he does, and I believe that TSO also loves working with him. So this is again another example of a great artist at earlier stages of a career, developing a relationship, and that's something which belongs to the history of our orchestra, and I'm very, very happy that that's also the case in between our orchestra and Ryan Bancroft. It was composed after the death of Stalin, and that's always interesting about music and those great symphonists and composers like Shostakovich or like Mahler, in which there is a programmatic idea, there is a source, and a starting point, but of course in the end we are just talking about music, and great music, which is very, very, very emotional, highly emotional. It goes from very soft, mysterious opening of the symphony, and it's a massive, great work. I have never conducted it myself, but it's a piece I love and I will for sure conduct in the future, but it's great having Ryan Bancroft conducting it here in Toronto. Per Gynt is one of probably the most prominent piece by Grieg. And it's you realize there is this connection, Sibelius, Greek, there is something of that Nordic mood, but it's also simply just beautiful music, which nowadays often programmed in concert halls by all orchestras in the world, which was initially meant for a theater play, but nowadays often performed in a suite, whether first, there are two suites of the work, but just very beautiful work which sets the audience clearly in certain mood, and which brings you in certain mood, but then having a new cello concerto and then going to Sibelius, there are a number of relationships but also contrasts within this program which make it very enjoyable. I'm sorry, probably I'm not in Toronto during that week, otherwise it's one of those concerts I would really love, just going to the audience, sit down and enjoy this wonderful music and this wonderful music making by Johannes Moser, Osmo Vanska and the TSO. Johannes Moser has a special place in my life because the very first concert I did with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, he was the soloist. We did Dvorak Cello Concerto, that was back in February 2018. We also are going to premiere this new cello concerto by Detlef Glanert, which is a co-commission between the Luxembourg Philharmonic, the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, also the concert hall in Cologne. It's great to have him. He's a Canadian-German artist. It's great to have him back in Toronto doing a new composition by a great composer like Glanert, who clearly influenced. Again, we talk about a composer who is clearly influenced of the great masters of the history, but it's a modern language. And I know Johannes is also very motivated and very proud of this creation by Detlef Glanert, German composer, and it's great to have this premiere in Canada here at the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. I never met Osmo Vanska, but he's a conductor, a prominent Finnish conductor who I admired. I do know about his work as music director in Minnesota for many years, something like 20 years, I think even longer than 20 years, and also in the Symphony Orchestra of Lahti. And indeed, I remember short ago listening to his recording of Sibelius symphonies with the Orchestra of Lahti. Every time I do Sibelius and I'm curious about what some great conductors did and recorded, he's one of the conductors I listen to. Of course, a colleague Klaus Makela, but also Paavo Berglund, Osmo Vanska, etc. There are prominent, great Finnish conductors, and he's one of them. It's great to have him back in Toronto conducting Sibelius. In this case, Sibelius' Second Symphony, which is in a way composed in the very beginning of the 20th century. And again, is when you talk about music and program and sources of inspiration, is of course Sibelius' Second Symphony representative of the context, political context of the time, and also a culture in which there was a clear desire of Finnish population in search of the independence. But in a way, you could also imagine, and you can also imagine, this is also the portrait of a human soul, and what it takes, the striving to something, a crisis, succeeding. Is that you can look at music, or you can tell about music in many different ways, but definitely representative of the context. At the times of the context of a culture, of a nation, and probably also of the human soul.